1. At this time, I'd ask Commissioner Peak to say the pledge, and we have Andrew Slade, Minister of Students at Westwood, who will give us a prayer.
Stand, salute, pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much, Lord, for this wonderful day that you have given us. Father, your word says in James 1:5-8, if any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask of God, who gives to all generously and ungrudgingly, and it will be given to him. But let him ask with faith. Let him ask in faith without doubting, for the doubter is like the surging sea, driven and tossed by the wind. And that person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord, being double-minded and unstable in all his ways. Father, I pray for each one of these representatives, Lord, for our county, that you would bless them with wisdom in the decisions that they make today. Lord, I pray that you would help them to depend upon you for wisdom and discernment on how to handle the affairs in our county, Lord, in our city, in our state, in our country. Thank you for them, and just pray you would be glorified in this meeting. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you very much. Prior to asking the mayor for his report, I'd like to thank everyone for being in attendance, and also Mr. Matt Bentley. It's an honor to have you here, sir. And at this time, I'd also like to say that Chairman Mall is under the weather. That's why I'm filling in for him. This time, I'd like to turn it over to the county mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, everyone. And for the sake of time, I don't really have anything big to report today anyway, so I'll pass it this time unless someone has something for me.
Anything for the mayor? That's great. Reports from the committees and our districts. We'll start on the right. Commissioner Epperson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everything's doing good in the first district, and at this time I don't have anything to report.
Commissioner Hughes.
Mr. Chairman, I have nothing to pass on today.
Commissioner Alford.
Second district's doing well.
Commissioner Peak.
Gosh,
Oh, I'm sorry. I got it mixed up. Commissioner Hughes.
Mr. Black. You got me confused with Commissioner Peak.
No, we wouldn't do that to you. Commissioner.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quick, just a quick update. As you probably saw in the paper, that they started the cleanup process out there at exit 20. They made a pretty good dent, 250-something tires, I believe. This effort will continue in the next coming weeks. I know this Saturday and the following Saturday are already scheduled. Keep America Beautiful and the volunteers going out there and help basically clean up, these sites. I will add also, talk to a representative, I was going to say Commissioner Hall, representative, that hopefully in their session that's coming up in January, they can put some more quote-unquote teeth in the law that those people who decide to dump tires out on property will face a tougher sentence. Anyway, that's my report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to thank Commissioner Mason for his continuing efforts in keeping Cleveland and Bradley County beautiful. He does a great job in my district. I think he does in everybody's district without even asking him. He's continuing to clean up, so I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Thompson.
Everything's okay.
Great. Commissioner Slater.
Thank you, Commissioner Crye. First off, I would like to congratulate Commissioner Peak on winning the Beam Award last week in Nashville. I don't really know what the Beam Award is, but congratulations on winning the Beam Award. Secondly, the Legal and Legislative Committee met today and had several items to discuss. The Legal and Legislative Committee voted to recommend requesting a letter to the District Attorney's Office to look at Fort Hill and Hillcrest Cemetery maintenance. Mr. Chair, I put this recommendation on next week's voting session agenda. We also heard a report from Vicki Towns from the Juvenile Committee and the issues that they are facing with being able to quickly work with students who are truant in the system. So we have voted to refer to the Education Committee a request to look at the truancy tier system that's been in place since 2018 to address students that are truant in the school systems. The committee also voted to formally request our legislative delegation amend the private act to increase our bid threshold from $10,000 to $25,000. I place this recommendation on next week's voting session agenda. We also are going to request the district attorney allow Bradley County to make claim for the injuries to Joker and restitution for all replacement costs if necessary. Mr. Chairman, I recommend putting this on next week's voting session agenda. And also, we will have a resolution authorizing Bradley County to join the state of Tennessee and other local governments as participants in the Tennessee State Subdivision Opioid Abatement Agreement and approving the related agreement settlements. And I put this on the voting session for next week also. And that's all that I have today.
Thank you very much, that's a lot. Commissioner Mason,
Excuse me, Chair.
I'm sorry.
Could you elaborate on the last one and just let everybody know what that means?
The opioid one?
Yes.
So there'll be more that comes with that in the near future. But this just allows the mayor to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Mayor, it allows you to participate and request that we receive some of the funds that are going to be distributed from the opioid settlement that's going to be upcoming.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Commissioner Mason?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. The road committee will have a committee meeting next Monday at 10:30 here in the commission room. All y'all that serve on the committee, please remember this. I was not here last week and had a death in my family, so I don't know if this is something that, I know they voted on some things with the Bradley County school system, but I'm part of the school system on the, I'm part of the commission for the education committee, and I just want for them to look at the secretaries, custodians, cafeteria staff, bus drivers, and part-time employees. I know teachers are really important, but those folks, I was an SRO in the school system for years and years, and I know what those folks in the school system also do. The smaller folks, as we call them, but they do a big part in our school system to keep it to rolling. And I guess the last thing I want to talk about today is Odell Swafford. Let's do remember the Swafford family. I jotted down a few things about Odell today that probably come back to mind. And I guess a friend to all, honest, faithful, he's a legend. He always stood his ground and told it like it was. A quick story about Odell, real fast. Back in 2018, that was my first stop. I went to his house first to see if I even had a shot at being the next commissioner in the 6th District. And of course, him and Raymond, they said yes. And they're very good friends of mine and my family's. And I'll never forget, Odell told me, he said, "Give me a stack of those cards, boy." And I don't know, he probably took 500 cards of mine. And I said, "What are you going to do with all this?" He said, "I'm going to pass them out." He said, "I'm going to get them all at South Walmart." And I said, "Well, Odell," I said, "everybody probably don't vote in the 6th District." He said, "I know which ones vote and which ones don't." So that meant a lot to me. And let's remember Raymond and the judge and all the Swafford family, Register of Deeds folks. I'm sure their hearts are heavy today. And let's all say a prayer for them throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mason. You mentioned look at the custodians and part-time people. For what? I didn't get the what part, I'm sorry.
Just for, I think there's some money bonuses coming to the teachers, just to look at those folks also. I think they've got a school board meeting coming up Thursday before it gets away, just look at those folks also.
I'll pass it along to,
I had several calls from folks, and I won't elaborate who the ones that called me from those that I listed, but let's just remember them.
thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
All is well in the six, thank you.
That's great. Commissioner Roper.
Thank you. Just have one thing. I see Dr. Bancroft, former commissioner and friend, and I just want to welcome him to the commission meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Winters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The orange cones are up on 60 Highway, so we expect some movement to happen from TDOT. I need to advise people in the subdivisions, just as mine is there, that there might be some red stakes with red flags on them in your yard. Doesn't mean there's going to be any digging in your yard. All it's going to mean is there's electrical lines that they might look at. And also reminding them as you exit, as if we would forget, that there's construction being done on 60 Highway. So those orange cones are up, and we're anticipating some movement pretty soon on 60 Highway. That's all we got.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman. Yes, Commissioner Hughes.
Mr. Chairman, I failed to advise that I talked to State Representative Howell. As most of you know, the legislation was passed about the mandate vaccine. He spoke highly of our resolution that was passed that helped him immensely in making his decision on how to go with that. So with everybody here, thank you.
Thank you very much. Hopefully it won't take 10 years to get the yellow cones or orange cones down as it did to get them up. On the agenda items, number 8 is a resolution to rezone, and I'd like to let Commissioner Hughes bring that up, please.
This resolution to rezone from Forestry Agricultural Residential District to a General Commercial C2 and Highway Commercial C3 property located at 5473 Water Level Highway and identified by tax map 059M, Group A, parcels 017.00 and 017.02. These are on pages 3 and 4. That shows a map of this. This did go through, went through planning and passed unanimously.
Thank you very much. Anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, number B, agenda item number B, Master Utility Plan. Commissioner Epperson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We are been a long road getting to this point, and would like to thank a few people prior to calling Gary Crosby up and Adam Driver to present this to the full commission. This is basically the plan that we've been working on for the last almost 8 months now, and would like to appreciate all the committee members that sat on that ad hoc committee and all the meetings. There was a lot of meetings, group meetings, one-on-one meetings. I'd like to thank all the commissioners that took the time to come to those meetings. This is a comprehensive plan. It's complicated, and hopefully they'll put some insight, and anybody have any questions on this plan would be able to ask at this time. I'd like to appreciate all the utility companies that were involved in this study. We know a whole lot more now than we've ever known our situations in Bradley County. We know things that we need to work on. We have a lot of good participation out of all the utility companies. TDEC, we appreciate them for giving us the information that just came not too long ago about how severe the problem is in Bradley County with the septic systems, septic systems going on in Bradley County, and they'll go over that with y'all today too. And also the public. We appreciate the public input on the opportunity that we allow them to come in and share their concerns or questions and things, and also the stakeholders. But do want to appreciate all those people. It's been a long road, and but right now we'll turn the floor over to Adam Driver.
Thank you, Dennis.
Mayor Davis, Bradley County Commissioners and guests. we'd like to thank you for being here and taking a few minutes to go over our draft water and sewer master plan for Bradley County. I'm Adam Driver with AD Engineering Services. We're a full-service civil engineering firm in Chattanooga, and we strive for excellent service, good communication, and good project completion. We've partnered with Gary Cosby, and we also have Don Tabor with him today with CTI Engineers, also in Chattanooga, because of their excellent and great experience with water and sewer and helping communities just like Bradley County. Dennis, you said it really well. Thank you to all the commissioners. Many of y'all have been at many of our meetings with the utilities, the meeting that we held with the stakeholders, the meeting that we had with the Bradley County residents. We got a lot of good feedback. The stakeholders told us we need more sewer infrastructure. The residents told us we don't want to develop in the most rural parts of Bradley County. And they also said we need help with septic system issues. So we hope that this plan provides some good information and good recommendations, and we hope to be a good team member to help Bradley County. So the goals of the master plan that we were given, and I'll just go ahead and say what those are, were to assess the current water and sewer infrastructure, to assess the needs, the current needs and future needs of Bradley County, and also to prepare a plan for the needed services. Also of great importance was protection of public health and the environment. So those were the goals. Then we'll talk about the information that we gathered that helped us form the recommendations. Then Gary will discuss several areas within the county, very specifically some of the infrastructure challenges they face and recommendations for improved service. And then finally, we'll talk about several different scenarios and then the next steps to move forward with projects if chosen. If possible, please hold your questions till the end. We think the presentation is going to be in the range of 30, 40 minutes. We'll try to move through it quickly. There are 5 active counties that serve Bradley County. You have Cleveland Utilities, Ocoee Utilities in the eastern portion of the county, Charleston Calhoun, Savannah, and the East Side Utility in the southwest corner. The Hiawassee Utilities Commission is also a wholesale producer of water in the county. All of the active utilities provide water service, and the county generally has good water service to most residents. But only 3 utilities, Cleveland, Ocoee, and Charleston Calhoun, provide sewer service, and it's generally only available within the incorporated cities such as Cleveland and Charleston and along the East Highway 64 corridor. Much of Bradley County relies on septic systems for sewer needs. This map shows in red the kind of darker orange-red color areas that have very limited, severely limited soils for septic systems. You can see it's most of the county. Unfortunately, a lot of times the poor soils result in septic system failures, which do pose a public health risk. Our team coordinated with the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation, TDEC, and requested the locations of areas with septic system issues. They provided 371 actual addresses of people that requested applications to repair their septic systems because of failures over the last 4 years, 2017 through current. We also received 5 addresses from residents that contacted us during this plan through the county's website and said, hey, we're having septic system issues, can you help us? We've added, I'm going to try to use your mouse pad here, Lori. We've added there it is, this black dashed line that goes across, that kind of separates the southeastern portion of the county. That's the Tennessee Valley Divide. So the area north of that line drains up to the Hiawassee River and then over to the Tennessee River, okay? South of that line, it goes into the Cahola Creek watershed. Why that's important is, I'm just gonna walk over here and show you something. Be easier to point out. The city of Cleveland, you don't see a lot of septic system issues, right? Just outside where the sewers are limited, where there are no sewers, this is where you're seeing a whole lot of your septic system issues. By the way, this map doesn't show all of the 376 locations. If you zoom in, one dot may turn into 5. Okay, but it represents the clusters, and you can see there's a lot coming down Spring Place Road and Dalton Pike. There's also a cluster up here around Georgetown Pike. Bradley County has historically grown, and it's expected to continue growing. From 2000 to 2010, we added about 10,500 residents. From 2010 to 2019, over the next 9 years, another 9,500 residents. And the population projections are showing a continued growth of around 10,000 residents every decade. You go to 2030, you're up to 120,000 residents. 2040, almost to 130,000. Several previous planning documents were adopted by Bradley County. There was the 2035 Bradley County, Cleveland, and Charleston Joint Strategic Plan. And then in 2014, Bradley County adopted the Bradley County Comprehensive Plan. There were also a northern area, a central city area, and a southern corridor area plan that were also adopted in 2014. These previous plans are very important because, one, they were a joint effort between the county and the cities, and they developed a strategy to manage future growth and guidance on where that growth should occur. The Joint Strategic Plan identified 10 goals for future planning. Some of the most important ones are: 1, efficient growth; 2, infrastructure-directed growth; 6, housing choices, a good range of affordable housing, more expensive housing, housing choices; and finally 7, very importantly, natural and cultural resource protection. So the plan recommended a blended growth scenario with about 45% of the residential growth in urban areas and about 55% in unincorporated Bradley County. The bottom bullet shows it also recommends to preserve the most rural areas. And then the second bullet says, where is the growth recommended? It's recommended in managed growth areas along major roads surrounding the urban areas. The Bradley County Comprehensive Plan, again adopted in 2014, had 4 main goals, one of them being to provide adequate and timely utilities to the location and timing of growth in the most cost-effective manner possible. It recommended future development once adequate funding is secured to extend utilities into 5 main corridors: Dalton Pike, Spring Place, Water Level Highway, Georgetown Road, and South Lee Highway. So these are the 3 area plans. The northern area plan encompasses area basically between the city of Cleveland and the city of Charleston, including Charleston and some areas in the northern portion of Cleveland. The main takeaways from this plan were that the Lauderdale Highway and Old Low River Road are most appropriate for industrial development. The Mouse Creek Road area is somewhat constrained for development by the roadway. The roadway would need improvement for substantial development. Some small developments are okay, but a lot of development would require better roadways. And then the northern portions of Chattahoochee Valley Road, Dry Valley Road, and Frontage Road should remain relatively rural. The Central City Area Plan is made up mostly of land in the city of Cleveland, with the southeastern portions being in unincorporated Bradley County. This area is prime for redevelopment and infill because most of it has existing water and sewer infrastructure. Areas inside the urban growth boundary may be annexed to support growth. And that's generally what's going to make the most sense. If there's some area inside that urban growth boundary, to go ahead and become annexed if it needs to be developed. For areas outside the Tennessee Valley Divide, a plan is needed for sewer service. Again, everything's draining away from the city of Cleveland, and there's some type of plan that's needed, which Gary will discuss in our recommendations. The Southern Area Plan also includes a portion of the city of Cleveland in its northern area. In the middle area is a very natural area, includes Bendabout Farms. And then the southern area is outside the urban growth boundary and has seen less development pressure. So as Dennis mentioned, we met with all 5 of the utilities in the county. They were extremely helpful. They gave us information on exactly what utilities they had and where, about how they operate, and what they're looking to do in the future. Again, Bradley County's blessed with great water service everywhere. So that's fortunate. And they all care. They all were just very forthcoming. We can't thank them enough. We then held a stakeholder input meeting with developers and the industry, and the main takeaways were that they cannot keep up with the current housing demand, that there are many available properties, but they can't be used because of poor soils, and that sewer is needed to get density and more affordable housing. Doug Berry with Economic Development said, companies looking to bring jobs to Bradley County or any community are looking for many things, including the availability of workforce and affordable housing. So then we held a public meeting with Bradley County residents. The main takeaways were, we don't want development in far rural Bradley County. We understand near the cities, but not in the far reaches. One resident, and there were a lot of discussions and asks, requests for help with septic system issues. One lady said, look, my kids can't play in the backyard because of the septic system issues. But again, the community was very helpful. Many of you guys were there. Thank you very much. Then finally, a web page was added to the Bradley County website with information on this plan, a link where residents could make comments, and of the 15 comments that we received, most were about septic system issues, 3 asking for service, and 1 voicing a concern about the cost of sewers. By far, most of the public comments were about septic systems. So after gathering this information on the existing utilities, we've prepared several recommendations for improvements, and Gary will discuss those in more detail.
Thank you, Adam. And I'm going to cover a group, the next section, I'm going to call it alternative analysis. Not necessarily a lot of alternatives, because some of them are intuitive, obviously, what we ought to do. But I'm going to go through that, first in water and then in sewer. So I'm talking about a number of potential projects. So there's some costs, there's some description to it, and some maps. So make kind of a quick run through. There's a lot more detail in the report on this section. A lot of maps that show potential line locations and sizes and things like that. So this will be kind of a quick run through of potential projects that we can do to address some of the things that Adam talked about. The first on the water service, one of the goals we had was to try to make sure everyone had access to public water in the county to the extent we could. There's really portions of 3 roads that don't have water lines that we're proposing to address, and they're listed up here. There's another portion on the eastern slopes of White Oak Ridge that's not even in any service area. It's outside of service areas, and it does not have water, mainly because of higher elevations. And to serve that would require another pressure zone, probably pump station, tank, and a number of lines. We're not proposing right now to serve that because of the cost, but that is another area of the county that is not currently served. There are some low pressure problems. We're recommending that the local utilities, they know where those are, and that they probably would handle those. One of the things we will be addressing, and more will be said later, has to do with the fire hydrants, availability of fire hydrants. There are a lot of hydrants. All the utilities have fire hydrants in the county. They're not necessarily spaced where they need to be provide to meet the fire protection type codes. But the utilities are not under legal obligation to provide those. They provide some for their flushing requirements, but beyond that, they don't have are not the obligation to provide those. They would need someone to help fund those. And we'll be suggesting that the county help in some way on that. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. Just some general things before I get into specific areas, some general things about the sewer service. And these are kind of a guiding principles, you might say, that guided our development for these. I'm not sure why.
Check later right there, it pops up occasionally again.
Will they go away?
If you'll click on later, which is left of the blue box, it will go away.
See, does that just do that by itself?
It does.
Okay, my finger's not. And Adam touched on this, but if you're in a fringe area next to Cleveland or even next to Charleston, if you're in a fringe area within the urban growth boundary, the easiest approach is for developers to request annexation and work with the utility to obtain sewer service. For existing residential areas that are outside the city limits, we're not proposing really to sewer those existing developments. And one of the main reasons is cost. To try to sewer existing developments is very expensive, and it would quickly use up all your available funds, and they could be used to extend sewer service further out in the system. Yes, there may be septic tank issues in there, but those areas could, in fact, they could be annexed either by the city or by request of the residents, but it would require a referendum. But that would probably be the best way to secure sewer service in already developed residential areas close to the city. For areas with failing septic tanks, and Adam showed a map of how many there had, and most of our comments from the public were about septic tanks. We can't serve all those. A lot of them are scattered all over the place, but we're going to be suggesting that you set up a program to help folks in correcting some of those issues, and there may be grant funds available to assist you in that. Continuing on in the general approach, for developable areas that are distant from the city limits, outside urban growth boundaries, you can look into providing the sewers by Bradley County with perhaps the participation of the local utilities and developers. And the intent would be to get a backbone out there. I call it a backbone or trunk line to which those along the way could connect, as well as developers in developable areas could then connect and build the sewers and extend the sewer service area in that way. For sewers that are in the Cleveland service area, the best way would be to negotiate with Cleveland to accept the wastewater from those. If that's not workable, then provide decentralized treatment, and we'll get into specific areas on that. And as Adam mentioned, we're not planning to extend sewers into designated rural areas. as many of you know, one of the challenges in going to Cleveland, which in most cases is the most feasible way to handle the sewage, especially for those areas that are close in. They currently do not accept wastewater from areas outside the city limits. You'd have to be annexed into it. But for areas that are distant away, that doesn't really provide much relief. And so one approach that we have considered, and that is to pay Cleveland to rehabilitate existing sewers, eliminate I&I, which is infiltration inflow, in order to create the capacity needed for wastewater outside the city. And infiltration inflow is leakage into the sewer during wet weather. It causes overflows, it robs capacity from the system. So it's one of those things that you could pay Cleveland to remove that and then get a credit, but which you could then use to add flow from outside the city. We think this is a workable way. Obviously, it'd have to be negotiated, but it's been used in areas where there are sewer moratoriums in order to create additional connections in those areas. So it's a commonly used approach. And that's what we'd suggest as a way to obtain the capacity in order to go into the city sewers. Now, that failing, of course, we'd have to look at treatment. Just to get an idea of capacity versus the size of developments, looked at two different things, both with around 100,000 gallons a day of average flow. And you can see that 330 homes on a gravity sewer at 300 gallons, or say 400 homes at 250 gallons per unit on the pressure would give you that. The reason there's a higher flow on the gravity is there's the potential for leakage into that. So if you had supporting infrastructure in order to provide this at $4 million, you can see the cost per connection would end up somewhere in the range of $10,000 to $12,000. And we're estimating at somewhere in the range of $10,000 to $15,000 per connection in order to provide the initial capacity in some of these areas that we would extend it into. About half of that made up from the actual sewer lines themselves, about half of it made up from the necessary capacity, treatment capacity, whether it comes from Cleveland or whether it comes from a treatment plant. I'm going to quickly run through some of the scenarios for the sewers on this, on my map here. This first one is going to be looking at some of the Spring Place Road sewers, and I'm going to walk over the map. I have a pointer, but it doesn't work on TV, so I'm going to have to walk over to it. Cleveland here, this is Spring Place Road out to the edge of the Cleveland service area. This is in Ocoee Utility District, so this is obviously outside. This is the urban growth boundary, the city limits. It's outside the city limits, outside the urban growth boundaries, so all the way down to the boundary here at Cohoa Creek and continuing on over into the Ocoee Utility District area. But sewer could be run along Spring Place Road, extending from Cleveland down to the end of the service area and then continuing on into the Ocoee Utility District area. We're suggesting that in these areas here what's known as pressure sewers. There's two types of sewers, gravity sewers, pressure sewers. Gravity sewers have to follow pretty much the drainage way downhill. Pressure sewers do not have to do that. It's a sewer by its name. It's under pressure. It does not have to follow the drainage way downhill. It can be shallower. It can be up to a third of the cost of gravity sewers. And so that's one of the reasons we look at that. The downside to it is that it's a little more difficult to connect because you have to have a pump in order to pump into it. But they're very commonly used these days. And some of these extensions, in order to try to do them and have the money to do them, we're looking at pressure sewers instead of gravity. We use gravity where we can, but in some cases, like this, these sewers drain away from Cleveland to pump them back, to go back to Cleveland. We'd have not only have to have gravity down to the end of it, a pump station, then a force main back. And that's all compared with one pressure line in the pressure sewer. So that's what we'll be looking at for these types of areas here. This is an Ocoee Utility District map, turned sideways. North is to the left, but in the lower right corner, there's also where the Spring Place and Ladd Spring Road sewers would be. And we would propose a treatment plant in that area down there for the Ocoee District sewers. They do this already, and so it's not an issue with them to provide a treatment plant in their area. Back up here. Just a picture of Spring Place Road. Most of you are familiar with that area. There's some more information on that. It's all outside the urban growth boundary. The estimated cost of the portion in the Cleveland service area is a little over 1.8 million. And the, oops, go back over here. And the cost of the sewer in the, it could be combined with the sewer in the, this is Ocoee. I'm back up here. 1.8 million. That's Cleveland. Here is the Ocoee Utility District area at 1.9 million. They could be combined together for around 3.4 million. Next section, Georgetown Road, Georgetown Pike. And again, I'll show you what it is. Cleveland here is Georgetown Pike extending up here. Most of this would be outside of the urban growth boundary, shown here in this line, city limits. Some of those were close by and could be served by lines, the short branches coming back into the city. They're inside the urban growth boundary. We would not propose the county building those lines. But outside up here along Georgetown Pike, you could extend the line down Georgetown Pike to perhaps Eureka Road, pump station, and then pump back to Cleveland. And again, that can be handled with either gravity or a combination of gravity and pressure. Clearly, the gravity and the pressure would be less costly than all gravity up there. Picture of Georgetown looking up towards Eureka. The all gravity alternative, if we did that, a little over $4.5 million. If we drop down, use a portion of it for pressure, about $3.5 million for that area to serve the Georgetown Pike area. Okay, the next, caught up on my maps here. The next one is Dalton Pike corridor. Again, along with Spring Place, Dalton Pike was identified as having septic issues. And I'll go to the map once again. Spring Place was here, Dalton Pike here. You can see that a good portion of it is actually inside the urban growth boundary, just barely, running down and continuing on here. Again, either gravity sewer or a pressure sewer could be extended down Dalton Pike. The pressure sewer is probably about a third of the cost of the gravity sewer. Picture of the road there, and the gravity sewer, if we did that, to include a pump station and a force main, about 4.8 million. The pressure sewer at about 1.9. This is the what is called the southern corridor. And as Adam talked about, extending from the city on down to the county line along US 11 South. There's a, go back to the map here. A portion of this US 11, here's 64 bypass, AP 40, 75 over here. A portion of this already been sewered by Cleveland Utilities. This is the area in the Bend About Farms that's restricted from further development. McDonald. There's an area between McDonald and the county line that could be covered with a small diameter pressure sewer, much like on Water Level Highway, and with a decentralized treatment plant there. So that could be handled there. There's a picture of the highway there south of McDonald, and estimated cost of about $1.35 million. This is the next group is the northern corridor. It's a fairly large area extending from Cleveland up to Charleston. And again, I'll go to the map on that. Cleveland here, Anatole will be about roughly right here. Here's US Highway 11. I know it's a faint line. That would be 11. Lauderdale Highway across up here. See the perspective, Charleston here. It could be served with a gravity sewer system that extends from near the city limits on up along Little South Mouse Creek, Walker Valley Road to Lauderdale Highway, and then west to existing Cleveland sewers at Mouse Creek. And with branches over to Highway 11. They also use a pressure sewer along Highway 11, almost all the way up to Charleston, and then again a branch over connecting over to this existing interceptor on Mouse Creek. Charleston, of course, has a sewer system. They pump over the same way. They pump this way over to ultimately to the interceptor over here. This is a large area. The gravity project would be very expensive, and so we're recommending kind of a hybrid pressure sewer, gravity sewer type approach up there. And just some pictures. That's Walker Valley Road, North Lee Highway, Lauderdale Highway. It's a fairly complex system, a lot of lines, and the gravity portion would be a little over 8 million. Combination pressure gravity, about 4.6 million on that. Water level highway, 64 east. Again, this map is turned sideways. If you envision north to the left side of the page, up the page would be Polk County, down Cleveland. McCoy has already run over much of this section of the pressure sewer all along Highway 64, so there's service all along there. They've got a treatment plant at Brighton Ridge. They're planning another treatment plant along Old Parsifal Road, and additional extensions here, and here. So they have pretty well covered that corridor with sewer service along there. We're not proposing right now that the county did add additional lines to that area. Sure, the highway. So yeah, they're actually taking the initiative to handle that area out there. The next one I have is what we call the Central City area. And again, lack of my pointer, I'm going to go up to the screen. Central City area encumbers this portion of Cleveland and outside. This is APB 40, 64 bypass, 64. Spring Place here, Dalton Pike here. But there's areas in here that are inside the urban growth boundary, orange line, outside the city limits, that could easily be served by sewers connecting to Cleveland utilities. There's an area up here that's almost entirely encompassed by the city that will be the same way. So we're not really planning any additional extensions in these areas because, again, they could be served by short gravity extensions from Cleveland. This next area is what we call the Western Urban Fringe. And again, I apologize having to go to the map here, but here's I-75. Here's the 64 bypass APB 40 down here. So, and here's the White Oak Ridge up here. Mainly encompasses these areas that are on the eastern side over here, and a lot of on the east side of Freewell Road. And again, this area drains back to Cleveland sewers, so it could be handled with some branches here, and here. Again, the developable areas in that could simply request annexation and work with Cleveland utilities for the extension of those sewers. And so we're not proposing that Bradley County actually pay to extend those, because Cleveland has already shown a propensity to do so. They've extended the sewer down here already out that way. They're extending the sewer here to the newly annexed area, Prospect area. So again, on the western fringe, since it all drains back to Cleveland sewers, it's all in the urban growth boundary. We're not proposing that you all expend county money to do those sewers. That's Harrison Pike, I believe, and, but anyway, gravity sewers could be extended up these watersheds, and we're recommending just working with Cleveland Utilities as far as the developers to do that. On the eastern fringe, there's an area on the eastern fringe, similar kind of a situation. And it will be down in this area here. The airport is right here. That gives you some idea. Northley Highway here, airport here. So it's in this area here. We call it the eastern fringe. There's a developable area inside the urban growth boundary. But on this, Cleveland is already looking to provide sewer service in that area along Michigan Avenue from their water plant north of the airport all the way down to existing sewers. This will be the Little Chattata Creek drainage area. So since they're already going to be extending sewers in that, we're not suggesting that Bradley County, again, pay to do that. Developers that are in that urban growth area there on the eastern urban fringe can work with Cleveland to for annexation and sewer service. That's Michigan Avenue, same thing here. And then as Adam mentioned, on up Dry Valley, Chattata Valley, the rural areas, we're not going to extend. So anything north of the airport, we're not planning to go that way. We took all of these and put them into a ranking table. And I know it's hard to see on here, but in your reports you will have it. You will have this table. And again, I'm going to go up to the screen here. You need some way to try to figure out, well, what do we do? What should we do? What should we do first? How important is it? We listed the projects on the table over here. We indicated where the wastewater is going to go. Some of them to Cleveland Utilities, some of them to a wastewater treatment plant. About the cost, and then we put in there 5 different criteria. These are subjective criteria. We put 5 different criteria. First one, the cost, and these were rated from on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being most favorable. 5 being most favorable, 1 being least favorable. So we had cost, lowest cost ones came out more favorable, potential developable area. In other words, if we were to do this project, how much area is there around there that could be developed for additional housing or commercial needs? And so we looked on the GIS maps to see what may be nearby and how much area there was on those. So those were rated in that way. For example, the north of the highway corridor, there is a lot of land up that way that could be developed. So we got a very favorable read. Septic failure. We took into account the map that Adam prepared, looking at clusters of areas that where we had really bad septic problems. So if we ran the sewer in that area, at least we'd be able to have somewhere where some of those could go in the future if they did. Ease of connection. Some were gravity, some were pressure. It's more difficult to get into a pressure sewer than a gravity sewer because you got to pump into it, even though the cost of the sewer is less initially. But those were rated. And then ease of implementation. Implementation being, how difficult is this going to be to make happen, aside from funding? For example, if we're going to Cleveland, we've got to negotiate with Cleveland in order to secure capacity from them. Otherwise, we have to go to treatment, which means siting and permitting a treatment plant. And not everybody wants a treatment plant next to them. So that's usually a challenge, but that was considered as well. We added up all the scores, and we came up with, all the ratings, we came up with a total score. And they were fairly close. Most of them were very close. And we actually had a tie for a couple of them for first place, but included the Spring Place sewers. The next 3 also tied again, the Northley Highway, Dalton Pike, and Georgetown Pike. And I guess the south of the highway corridor down near the Hamilton County line was probably lower on that. You could change any of these ratings by a point or so, and it could change the overall score and the overall thing. But it does give you some idea. It gives you a way, a method to how to rate these, such that you can try to decide, okay, which one is more important. And it may be that you say, well, I think it should be, a 3 instead of a 2 or whatever, and you can play with that to see what the score might be. But that's how we came up with trying to at least come up with some kind of priority to which of these to address. The total of all the sewers on there is slightly over $15 million. If you were to do all of them, which you don't have, but I mean, just to give you an idea of how much money that is. The recommendations, very quickly, I'm gonna run through these. There were 3 water line projects that I'd listed earlier, totaling just under $800,000. We're suggesting that you fund each year some amount of money to add fire hydrants out in areas that need them. It's fairly expensive to add a fire hydrant onto an existing line, as normally you got to cut into the road. You have, valves and tapping sleeves and all that, other than just the fire hydrant. But this would fund at least 15 new hydrants a year if you were to fund it at that level. Sewer service, we've talked about these. If you're in the urban growth boundary, near the city limits, the developers can request annexation for connection and work with the utility for the service. We're not proposing Bradley County funded sewers for Western Fringe, Eastern Fringe, Central City area. Those outside provide a backbone, trunk sewer, negotiate with Cleveland for capacity, otherwise provide decentralized treatment. These are the list of projects that I just went through and the costs. Again, I'm not going to go through these because they were shown on the comparison table. In areas with septic system failures, with no access to sewer, set up some kind of a program to assist in remediation of the worst cases and fund that annually. We're saying no more than $5,000 per case, per instance, and grant funds may be available to help you with that. And I mentioned the total available cost. You can prioritize those and based on the ranking, phase them to match as your funds become available. So you can bite this off in pieces instead of having to try to deal with the whole thing all at one time. You may be able to also get contributions from host utilities or developers to help make your dollars go further. Certainly that we would suggest doing that. Funding opportunities, there are a number of them involving loans and grants, a number of grant programs, and you can see them listed there, quite a few of them. Many of these are competitive grants. In other words, you have to compete with others on an annual basis for those grants. Most of the grants require some type of local match. It could be 10%, 20%, some besides 30% local match to match the grant. And I'll talk about the American Rescue Plan at the bottom there, since that money is coming up very soon. And you also have developer capacity charges as a way to secure additional money for some of these. On the American Rescue Plan, as you know, this money is coming to the cities and counties for the COVID relief. Direct appropriations from Treasury, you can see how much in Tennessee they're going to be getting, local cities and counties, $2.28 billion. The state will get some of that, but they're taking some of their money, $1.35 billion, and they're going to funnel it through TDEC for water, wastewater, and stormwater. And you can see how much they're going to take $1 billion and give to the counties for that. So a lot of money is going to be coming, whether it's direct appropriation from Treasury coming directly to the county, which you can use it for a wide variety of things, including water and sewer, or coming through TDEC, Tennessee Department of Environment Conservation, for water and stormwater and wastewater projects. And I'm going to turn it back over to Adam, so he's going to wrap up with implementation.
So we were tasked with providing some actionable steps, and we've attempted to do that. We've attempted to look at the challenges faced by the community and then come up with those recommendations. So now how do we get there? And there's really several scenarios. First, any new public water or sewer infrastructure must first be paid for, the design, the permitting, and the construction. And secondly, owned and maintained. So there's many scenarios for who pays for construction, and we'll go over several of those in just a minute. Infrastructure is usually owned by the utility that serves the area. In some cases, it's not, if it's the utilities on a private property, on a school property, or maybe like within a commercial development, a mall or something like that, that may be private. But in general, the utility owns and operates the infrastructure. So for isolated residential developments, an industry, a school, the developer or owner would usually make arrangements for and pay for the new infrastructure. Hey, they're doing the project, they're going to fund it. For an entire corridor, like Gary has gone over, a corridor such as Spring Place Road or Georgetown, typically either the utility or a public entity, such as Bradley County, would provide the public water or sewer and fund that. In 1972, Bradley County created the Bradley County Utilities Commission, tasked with developing a plan to provide a water and sewer system. So Bradley County has the ability to create a water and wastewater authority. The major issue with that is funding. And for example, initially there are 0 customers, and it's hard to develop a new utility, all of the billing, the maintenance, everything that goes into it without incoming funds. So it's been done before. It was done in Hamilton County with the WWTA. The Hamilton County loaned money to the WWTA to form their utility district. Then they went out and installed these skeleton lines, but then they also purchased other water systems or sewer systems, Eastridge and just several other ones. And so they gained customers and began a utility. Dade County, Georgia, Walker County, Georgia also did it. But it would be difficult to do. The majority of sewers proposed in the plan are located in Cleveland Utilities service area. So new sewers, if they are connected into Cleveland Utilities sewers, it's going to make sense that those would be turned over to Cleveland Utilities for them to own and operate. If there's something that's not connected into their sewer and Cleveland Utilities simply says, hey, y'all can sewer that area, it's in our service area, but we don't want anything to do with it, then a plant could be designed, permitted, and constructed, and you could sewer an area. Again, if they said they didn't, they have the first right of refusal, but another utility could come in and operate that. That's not uncommon. As a matter of fact, Ocoee has a utility, a decentralized plant in Cleveland's area now. So the same would be true in Ocoee and Charleston's service areas. If there's new sewer connected into their system, in all likelihood, they're going to take that over. As discussed, for a new residential subdivision, that's typically going to be paid for by the developer. Same thing, we have been involved in a residential development that was 199 lots on Signal Mountain. It included a decentralized wastewater treatment system, and that system, the decentralized wastewater treatment system, was also paid for by the developer, built to the standards of the utility, Walden's Ridge Utility in that case, and then the utility took over ownership and operation after construction. So that is a possibility for residential developments. You've got to have good enough soils to do it, and there are pocket areas, even with the map showing poor soils in a lot of places. Undoubtedly, we can find good soils isolated in certain areas. In most cases, it is not feasible to connect properties with septic system issues into a sewer. Gary mentioned that. That's just simply due to the cost of running a new sewer line all the way from this home, which may be a mile away, to a new sewer main that goes in. However, there'll be a handful of cases. We're looking at one of our recommendations is a new sewer line on Spring Place Road. And there's 5-10 homes that are going to touch that line, and they could easily connect in. So it would solve some of the problems. As Gary mentioned, it may be possible to establish a grant program funded by the county, possibly with some grant assistance, to help folks with failing septic systems either reconstruct their system or connect into a new sewer if one becomes available. Gary also mentioned there's some areas with low pressure and an area with no water service. These are typically best handled by the utility. They are aware of where they have low pressure. And so, again, it's a whole project to try to resolve that with pumps and tanks and that kind of thing. It's done all the time, but typically it's the utility that would do that if needed. It should be noted, there were no comments or complaints from the public on low water pressure. We did have a comment or two about no water. Gary also mentioned on fire hydrants. The utilities have fire hydrants for flushing their system, but they are not required to have them at a certain spacing for fire protection. And so additional fire hydrants in unincorporated areas would likely have to be paid for by the county if that's one of the priorities. Again, we could budget a certain amount each year for that. So the next steps to move forward with a project or multiple projects. Typically what happens is Gary's provided a ranking table that says, hey, based on several criteria, we think that these are the projects that make the most sense, and then down the list. But there may be information that we're not aware of, community needs that we're not aware of that would change that ranking. So the next real step for the county, if they would like to move forward with a project, is to select the project that they'd like to do. And then typically as funds become available, you knock out the top most important project and then you move down the list. Many different funding options were also discussed. Some of the grants and loans require a preliminary engineering report and an application. We have prepared those many times. We'd be happy to help. Then there's the question that we've discussed, where is the sewer going to go? So for any project, are we going to connect in with Cleveland Utilities? Are we going to have a decentralized treatment system? Cleveland Utilities in the past has not allowed connection from the county. In our meeting with them, they said, listen, we're open to looking at a project. If you have a project and you're willing to pay us to reduce our inflow and infiltration, and typically you've got to reduce it by 2 gallons for every gallon of capacity they give you. They said, well, look at it. You're going to pay us to reduce it, create capacity, get new customers. We'll listen. They didn't say they would agree to anything. So that would be the step, is working with the city of Cleveland, letting them know how much capacity we'd be looking for, and then working to negotiate an agreement on a cost for an amount of capacity given. It is generally considered a win-win by all. Right now, that area wouldn't have any capacity for sewer, and if you can work with Cleveland and get it, that'd be great, and they, again, it benefit them in several ways. If Bradley County is unable to negotiate an agreement with Cleveland Utilities for sewer connection, sewer capacity can be created with the decentralized treatment system. As Gary mentioned, you've got hurdles. The environmental permitting, finding a location. It's typically going to be a longer time frame than connecting directly with Cleveland Utilities. And then a utility would take ownership and operation as discussed. Engineering and construction. The proposed sewer lines and treatment plants shown on the plan are conceptual. There's been a lot of thought put into them, but they are still conceptual, and there's additional steps needed to make sure that they would work. Some further planning, likely agreements for easements, property acquisition, these types of things. These are all, again, things that are common to these projects, but they would need to be looked at more in more detail. And so your next engineering steps would be a preliminary engineering plan which dives into all those steps deeper, as well as has a more complete cost estimate. And then if that's acceptable to the county, a final engineering plans and the permitting. To summarize, we are proud to have partnered with the county to prepare this draft water and sewer master plan. The input from previous planning documents, the meetings with the utilities, the public meetings with the residents have all helped shape our recommendations. But this is not the end. We need your help. We need your questions. We need your input on the recommendations we've given. So thank you again for working with us, and know that we stand by and stand ready to help any way we can. And at this point, can we answer any questions?
Questions, please?
Short-term, step-by-step. To begin with, give us the 1, 2, 3 to begin.
Yeah.
All the details, because you're saying there's people without water, say there's people that need. I'm interested in this decentralized wastewater. What is that? How does that work?
A decentralized, we'll answer the question on the steps in just a second. The last question is, what is a decentralized wastewater treatment system? So a classic wastewater treatment system is like the one that Cleveland Utilities has up on the river. It's a large traditional sanitary sewer wastewater treatment system. Decentralized treatment systems typically use a different technology. There are multiple companies that provide packaged units. They come already with there's a company called Orenco. There's another company called BioClear. And these are kind of plug-and-play units. You put them in place, and there's a couple of important things about these decentralized waste treatment systems. First, each home has a step system, which is basically a septic tank with an effluent pump. So the septic tank does what's considered the primary treatment. It holds back most of your solids, and then the effluent is pumped into the low-diameter line to the package treatment plant, and it treats it there at a location. And the disposal of that can be many different ways. It can be in drip tubing, which is completely different than septic system. Septic system, drain field, you dig the trenches, you put in the gravel and that type of thing. But with a decentralized treatment system, it's treated water, and it's treated much more than in a standard septic system. And so you can put it in like 1/2-inch diameter tubing that's just trenched 6 inches into the ground. The Wild Ridge at Fox Run development on Signal Mountain that we talked about, it was 199 homes, and we ended up with about 9 acres of drip system. You leave the trees in place, and you run the drip emitter tube in the woods. The TDEC wants you to fence off the area. It's not chain link fence. In this case, it's kind of split rail fence, and a sign that just says, "Hey, this is keep out of this area." It's not Fort Knox, but it is. Hey, they just don't want anybody digging around and damaging the system. But it is dispersing treated water. Then there's also disposal to a large stream, if there is one that's large enough. And there's spray irrigation, like the city of Dalton does. Again, you're going to treat the water, disinfect it with UV. It's going to be really treated well, and you can also do spray irrigation with it.
Clusters as well as individual houses?
Well, it is. They have super small systems for a single home in some very remote area, but that's not what we're talking about today. Today we're talking about a larger system for 100 homes, 200 homes, up to 400 homes was one of the largest that was shown today.
What's the steps?
The steps are going to come from Bradley County. We can help. We can help with all of the steps. The engineering, the preliminary studies. We can help with the easement acquisitions if it turns out that that's needed. But the most important step is for Bradley County to tell us which projects are the most important to Bradley County. We've given our thoughts, but we need input back from you guys. Yes, thank you.
Commissioner Epperson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had just touching on what y'all were just talking about. You propose a decentralized system in the McDonald and Hamilton County line for $1,350,000, and then you propose one in the Spring Place Road And it says it can handle up to 25,000 gallons per day, for a cost of the one on Spring Place, $1,933 and 200 some odd change. How many houses are we talking about that these two decentralized systems that's costing this much would handle, working those two?
Most of these systems are on a pressure line, and so a typical flow from a home is 250 gallons per day on a pressure line. And so if you have a system that has, 50,000 gallons per day, that's 200 homes. Another thing to keep in mind is these projects are somewhat starter projects. And what I mean by that is you may have a mile of sewer line and a 50,000 gallon per day plant, but that may, if you're talking 200 homes, that's very helpful. But it may be that that plant could be expanded in the future and more people could connect into, the sewer line can handle a lot more than the treatment capacity we're showing. So you've already got the line in place. If you get additional treatment capacity, either from Cleveland or with a larger system.
So on these two decentralized systems, they could be improved or added to and expanded to handle even more.
What are your thoughts on that, Gary?
Yes, you can, either one. Like, for example, Spring Place, we had a larger treatment plant there at Spring Place than down south of McDonald. But in most cases, what you're putting in initially is an initial capacity. Whether the capacity, as he said, it comes from Cleveland or it comes from a treatment plant. You have lines and you have treatment capacity. And in a lot of these cases, the lines make up about half that cost, the treatment capacity about half of the cost. And we've included, in all those cost estimates, we have included what we estimate you may have to pay Cleveland, if it's going to Cleveland.
You're talking about the I-9?
Yes, in order to get the capacity credit from Cleveland, that cost is included in these projects. And so the ones that are shown to be going to Cleveland, that cost is in there. For the ones that don't go to Cleveland, there's a treatment capacity charge or cost in there. So as Adam indicated, we're putting in lines and initial treatment capacity in in those areas. The initial treatment capacity may only provide for 200 homes, 400 homes, depending on what we indicated that you were purchasing. The lines can handle much more. So you got the lines in place. And as time goes on, as say developers or customers along the line would want to add, you'll get to the point you may have to get additional capacity, whether it again comes from Cleveland or by expanding the little modular plant, putting in another unit there at the treatment plant in order to grow that capacity as the demand occurs. So we're not going out there and buying 1 million gallons of treatment capacity initially. You can't afford that. You have no customers to help pay for that base or anything. So we're giving you a certain amount of treatment capacity. We're giving you the lines to be able to connect to. And then depending on how demand occurs over time, there may come a point down the road you'd have to buy additional capacity from Cleveland or expand your plant somewhat. But that's kind of the approach we took.
Okay, and on these figures that you gave us here, just for all the other commissioners will understand, the I-9 that you said that was included in these costs, and that's a one-time cost for the 25,000 gallons per day, and then it's not like a yearly cost, or
No,
it's a one-time cost?
It's one time. And I think the one down on South Lake Highway, that treatment plant down there, we set it at 25. They're modular, so you can would easily make it a 50, but that one has a treatment plant. Another one, let's say a Spring Place sewer on the portion that's in Cleveland Utilities. When we put the cost of that pressure sewer on there, we also included in that the one-time cost to purchase a certain amount of capacity from Cleveland. I think in the case of that, it was 50,000 gallons. So that cost is built into that project. So you can see the full cost, and it's a one-time cost on that. You don't have to pay them each year. Now, let's say you went back after 5 years and you said, well, now I've got more demand than 50,000 gallons a day, I need another 50,000 gallons a day, then you may have to go back to Cleveland at that time and say, okay, we need to negotiate with you to acquire another 50,000 gallons a day of capacity.
Okay, and one last question, because I know some of the other commissioners have questions too. Other counties and cities throughout the state of Tennessee, and I know y'all do work in Georgia and things, other states too. Is this a norm, how they usually work this out, the city and counties doing the I&I?
It doesn't happen that often because you're only talking about cities that have an order that has essentially put a moratorium on the city because of their overflows. Cleveland has that situation. Chattanooga has that situation. So, you know, you have to work that out with them. And this is one way we're suggesting, because when sewer moratorium is put on an area, this is commonly the way that it's done. You remove a certain amount of infiltration inflow, they allow a certain credit for that to which you can attach new customers, even though you have otherwise you have a moratorium. But that's the way it works when a city cannot accept wastewater from surrounding area. In some cases, even outside of that type of prohibition, the city simply doesn't, you know, they're not going to pay for capacity for the county. They'll pay for capacity for the city. And so you just have to negotiate with the city, if they're the host utility, for that capacity. And that's just whatever you can negotiate on there. They may have to do improvements in their system, larger sewer lines, pump stations, in order to accommodate your flow. And they're saying, well, the city residents aren't going to pay that, so whoever it's coming from is going to have to pay that for that capacity. So it's the only way you have in these cases where capacity is not already available in the host utility, you're probably going to have to pay for it in some way.
Which is understandable.
So, Commissioner, I know that, but are you finished?
Oh, I'm finished.
Commissioner Raper is next, then Commissioner Peak, then Commissioner Slater.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, on cost of water, when you're talking about the low pressure areas or areas where you have none at all, do you have like an estimated cost of those high priority areas?
Yes, it's in report, and it's one of the slides we had on the water recommendations. There's portions of 3 roads don't have water service, and we're proposing to provide that. I think there's 6-inch lines on those. The total of the 3 was somewhat a little less than $800,000.
Next question. Yeah, I saw where you were listing the priorities on sewer, and Georgetown Road was a little lower. With all the construction about to begin out there, would that lessen the cost? Would it be good timing as far as doing sewer, or does it not matter?
The timing would be good because you have to accommodate utilities in expanded right-of-way. So we would need to know, the DOT would need to know that when they lay that out. And we certainly don't want to put a sewer somewhere where they're going to expand in 5 years or something like that. So you'd have to coordinate that with DOT on that.
Yeah, and my final question is this. You mentioned septic tank failures, and I have seen some of those, witnessed some of those from raw sewage servicing, a number of issues where they've spent thousands of dollars out of their pocket. How many approximately do we have in Bradley County that you know of septic tank failures?
As far as the number that we have, we don't know, but the fact that 371 residents requested permits from TDEC for septic system repairs because their systems were failing over 4 years tells us there is a lot. Undoubtedly, there are people that didn't request permits for repair, maybe because they couldn't afford it or other reasons, but we know of, and then another 5 residents contacted us directly and gave us their address, saying that's where they were having a septic system failure.
Thank you.
Yes.
Commissioner Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm excited to finally hear a plan and at least something to move forward. I know we're getting the American Rescue funds that we have designated to go towards water and sewer. I almost think it's enough to do all the projects at once. But if we did all of them at once, our first step would be going to Cleveland Utilities and seeing if they would negotiate with us to take our capacity without being annexed. And most of these were outside of the urban growth boundary that you were proposing our cost. So anything inside the urban growth boundary, it just do like it does right now. The resident would have to request to be annexed if they wanted that developed, or the individual, that would continue the same way. But everything outside that urban growth boundary is what you're discussing, that we would have to negotiate with Cleveland Utilities.
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Slater.
So if we could talk about Spring Place Road for just a minute, and your proposal of a decentralized wastewater treatment plant. How many acres would that take to put that on?
Again, you know, a conservative estimate is 1 acre per 20 homes. You can likely get more homes than that on an acre, but that is a conservative estimate.
And as you looked at these areas on Spring Place Road and the South Corridor, which is Highway 11 going toward Chattanooga, and any of the other ones that you have proposed a decentralized wastewater treatment plant, did you look at any property to put those on?
We did not look at property, and because that would require more extensive, I mean, these kind of facilities can go pretty well anywhere, and especially with the land disposal, the drip disposal that Adam described. So we didn't get into doing that. We think that in those areas we proposed treatment, that you could find a suitable spot to do that. And even if you can't, some of the creeks are large enough, you probably could be able to get a permit to go into Cahola Creek, Candy's Creek, any of those larger creeks like that. You'd probably be able to get a permit if you wanted to go into the creek instead of into the land. We would suggest trying the land first. But, you know, as he mentioned, 1 acre per 20 homes. So if you had a system that could initially provide capacity for 200 homes, that would be about, 50,000 gallons a day. You know, you're looking at about 10 acres of land for that.
And then just a comment, not really a question, but, you know, we know that septic system failure is an issue in Bradley County. I mean, just your map that you have dotted out of the 376 people that you know of that have requested a permit from TDEC in the past 3 years. I guess I'm somewhat just maybe disappointed that there's nothing in this that will directly help those people other than maybe they apply for some type of grant or they can request to be annexed. That's all I have, Mr. Vice Chairman.
And you're correct on that. The problem is, you know, that sewer lines are so expensive. For them to be able to get access to sewer, there's just, for most people, I'm sorry, you know, we wish we could. And we felt badly because in the public meeting, we heard story after story of, well, these problems. Some of them, their property was no longer even marketable.
Correct.
And so that's why we're saying at least do something, at least fund a program that each year you could handle the worst cases to help some of the folks out.
Yeah, and I would hope that we would take part of the money that's been set aside in the sewer bucket to use for this type of a program, to develop a partnership with some of these residents in all of our districts where they don't pay the full cost, but, you know, they have some skin in the game too, but we do help them in some way correct their issues.
Commissioner Blake.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, you have here on your draft, I assume that there's another version coming and that'll have more detail, or you'll take our feedback from today, or our questions,
Yeah, the idea, Commissioner, is we'll obtain feedback from you, questions, comments. We'll address that in the final version.
So there's one more version of it. Real quick, also, this may be for the mayor or yourself, when you talk about the fire hydrants and the impact it would have on the ISO ratings, Mayor, did we get the ISO rating? Did they say that if we increase the number of hydrants, that would positively affect our ISO rating? And if so, how many, and did they give us any direction on that? Because obviously, if you put more hydrants, it's going to be a good thing. But if we're counting on ISO to be positively affected, we want to know what we're getting for the hydrants.
Yeah, the availability of water is big in the ISO. It looks like that we're going to get a lot more points this go around because of a lot of water lines have been added along with hydrants. He's talking about an area that may have a road where there's a fire hydrant and then there may be a couple of miles without a hydrant. Ideally, you want them every so many thousand feet. But we got to the point where the ISO, from the ISO perspective, we got the blanket coverage. In other words, that doesn't mean every road has got the perfect amount of fire hydrants. But overall, they gave us the blanket for the last time, and hopefully they'll do that well again. But we do have a lot more lines and hydrants than the last ISO rating we went through.
But they didn't say if this being hydrants, then your ISO will be changed to this number. They just.
Well, when we get it, they'll give us points, and I'll make up something, don't quote me because it won't be right, but maybe there's a potential of 50 points for hydrants and we get 30. Well, that tells you that if we'd have gotten some more hydrants in certain areas, we'd have got 20 more points. But that's just one of the many areas that goes into the ISO. I'm not making light of that one, that's a very important one, but the total points we get of all of them put together is what determines our ISO rating.
I just want it measurable kind of thing,
Yeah.
that's all. Right?
Now, we used to fund in the fire department's budget some money for hydrants, but whenever, like Ocoee Utilities, if they're doing a lot of water lines with grants, they're gonna put them in anyway, so we weren't having to actually pay for extra ones, although that doesn't mean they're every so many thousand feet apart, like would be ideal.
Last one real quick, when we talk about the failing systems and those 300 plus people, I was in those meetings. Did you get a sense of like how severe they were? Did you like some of them were moderate and then some of them were like you can't even step in your backyard? I mean, so it was a degree. So obviously, you know what I'm saying?
No, sir, we did not. Yeah, they just simply that this system is failing and they've applied for a permit to repair it, but there was no range of how bad it,
No
right.
degree or whatever. And there, I guess I'm asking is, usually there's like steps that you can see that are getting ready to take place before it gets to a bad situation. I mean, age or weather or stuff like that, was that talked about as well? I mean, in other words, you're prime for a system. Right now, you may not be failing, but given all these factors, you can expect in the next so many years, you'll be one of those 370 people.
We didn't have a feel in the 370 of how any of that kind of information. Those were just permits that were requested. The people who showed up at the public input meeting, theirs were in bad shape. If they came here to voice their, obviously theirs are in bad shape. So we suspect that there's a lot of people who are in that case that didn't show up, but still have issues. And perhaps, as Adam said, may not even be able to afford it. Some of the costs to be able to rehabilitate a septic system, they could easily be looking at $8,000 or $10,000. If you did a program, we're suggesting, no, you're not going to pay that kind of money. There's got to be skin in the game. We'd say a cap of maybe $5,000, but again, there'd have to be some kind of a match for skin in the game. And you'd have to come up with criteria. Who's eligible? I mean, clearly, it's just like any other program.
Yeah, that's where I was kind of going, is hitting those high spots first. You know, those that are, moderate or even less than, we can kind of put them, not that they're not important, everybody's important, but in the back burner. But go after those severe ones first. That's kind of why I was asking the question, if you identify the severe ones, so we can low-hanging fruit, so to speak.
We don't know who,
Sure.
other than people who showed up at the meeting or emailed us, we don't know who else out there
So we'll
has
have,
these
we'll
kind
have
of
to work
problems.
on
Yeah.
that, but again, thank you for your report, I appreciate all the time and effort you put into it.
And just one more, if I can, one more point on that is if the program is set up, we can develop an application
Okay, good.
and, questionnaire so we know how bad it is and the need.
Say, Mr. Vice Chair, I agree that these systems right here are not just the money piece of it, I think it's the quality of life. And when you're talking about sewer and stuff, your health issues come into play as well. And I think it behooves us to really put some priority with the existing systems that, and this program, anything I can do to help on that, I will.
Commissioners Peak, Holford, and Epperson.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Point of order. I haven't had opportunity to speak, Ms. Peak spoke a couple of times already.
Go ahead, I relinquish my
Thank you,
time.
Commissioner Peak. Commissioner Holford.
Alford.
Just a simple question, these septic tanks that are failing, did they give you a reason why they're failing?
No. No, sir, they did not.
Well, let me ask you this then, when a builder builds a house, it's responsibility of the builder to make sure that land perks?
It is,
And
yes.
if the land doesn't perk at a later date, who's responsible then to fix it?
So the standard process is you have a soil scientist, and they're reliable, but they're humans, to go out and map the soils. And then when you get a plat for a new property, you have to reserve the area for the septic system and then a reserve area in case that area fails. And so that's how the process goes. In some cases, they may be older systems. Maybe there wasn't a reserve system. There is a component of it that a system has to be maintained and pumped out every so often. You would hope that before the people apply for a permit to do construction and repair their system, that they've pumped it out and worked with a plumber to try to maintain it. But no, there was no information on that.
Do you not think that would be very, very important to find out if the builder built the property that didn't perk to start with?
It would, yes. Yeah. If you're going to repair it, you have to assess what do you have, what can be reused. So yes, it would be very important to see how it was constructed. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Commissioner Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I love how we always try to blame the builder for septic failures. First of all, the majority of the people that have came to this commission and had issues with their septic tank failures were 20-plus-year-old houses or longer. So back in the day, the state still continues to issue those permits, by the way, not us, but the state issues those permits, and soil maps are obtained. Back in the day, I don't know if soil maps are obtained or not. I know that we do that way now. We follow a standard, and our standard is to get a soil map. And when that soil map is presented to the state, they make the decision on where you can put that tank or if you cannot put that tank. No septic system is guaranteed to last over 20 years. It doesn't matter how good you put that system in. It's not guaranteed over 20 years because land can only absorb effluent so long, so many years. So instead of blaming the builder, maybe we should ask other questions. Like, how old is your system and how have you maintained it? But they sell it and they sell it and they sell it, and you don't know if the tank's ever been pumped, you don't know if the field lines have been smushed in or tree roots are growing in them. You don't know those issues. So if people need help with their septic system, let's give them a grant for it. We've got an HCI water grant. I don't see the problem with the same application we give to those water people that we can't give for septic issues. And we can take care of those 371 or 376 people that need it. We can all get skin in the game and help them out in that manner. That just flew all over me. Always trying to blame a builder. Back to the HCI grants, I think we can do that, and that can be accomplished that way. The 3 roads that you mentioned that have no water on them, that does not include certain roads that water never went to the end of the road, or did it? Did we have any of those? Because we still get HCI water grant applications, from people that are on a road, but they haven't hooked up to it, or the water is very close to them, but they need to run it 200 more feet to their driveway. I think we still have several of those roads.
There may be, but the only ones that we had knowledge of is where the utilities told us, okay, this road's not served. They didn't tell us like, okay, I've got 200 feet here, I gotta add. We pretty well will leave some of that to those utilities without the county necessarily paying for that. We just don't know that. Or the resident, if the residents told us, then we would know. And we had one situation where the residents told us and not the utility. But we're only looking at the ones we were aware of to fund.
And Sugar Creek Road is also served by Savannah Utilities?
Ocoy.
Ocoy? Okay. Is it the Sugar Creek Road in Georgetown?
It's on out, I think the one we're looking at is on out towards, it's off Water Level Highway area.
Oh, okay, there's another Sugar Creek in Georgetown. So we've got the 3 roads plus the White Oak area, plus then several others that is included in this total package. Thank you.
Commissioner Epperson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to highlight, talk about this, yours on page 56, you're saying that if we did all 6 sewer projects, we're looking at $15 million, $234,000. And you mentioned numerous ways of grants and things to try to achieve and that could help pay for this. And we've already, I think, a little over $5 million that's sitting in 2 buckets. As long as those buckets don't get touched, we have a pretty good bit of money to maybe even start this or implement this. And I shared some information about septic tanks being redone in the Conosauqua area up in towards the Old Ford area. There are programs already in place that will help these people with the septic system. And 2, I don't even know if we have a grant writer or anything that would even come up to try to help us to achieve. And maybe this is a question for the mayor, but there's programs in place, but I don't know if we have anybody that would help us to achieve getting grants to help some of these people that have these septic tank problem issue. And also, do we have a grant writer in place that would help us try to achieve the other $10 million that would basically put this whole plan into motion? Well, I don't know. Would you pose that question to the mayor?
I will just say this, we've gotten numerous CDBG grants over the years. We just finished one called the sewer grant with Taylor's. And usually if it's big enough, we contract with the development district, they provide the grant writers, they provide all of the work, paperwork and reporting that goes along with it. So we've done these lots of times. And I don't know about grants for sewer, but we are looking at the bucket for sewer grants for septic tanks I'm talking about. And it is, at least in the thought process, that we make money available there to treat septic tanks like we have done water in the past, where it's a 50-50 basis or however you want to word it. So we can take care of that by granting it out ourselves. CDBG grants for these other things, assuming they stay in with all the money they're flooding in these new names for grants. CDBG is always on the chopping block, but if they stay in the federal programs, we've done those numerous times. So we've done sewer grants, by the way. Sewer is all the way down South Lee Highway to the old apartments before they tore them down, and we put them there with a $500,000 grant that was matched by Cleveland Utilities. So that's how that sewer got down South Lee Highway. So we've done lots of them, and we can do more of them as they become available.
Does anyone else have any comments? Commissioner Williams.
Just follow up on that, you heard from all of us, now that step by step, we have a draft that you turned in, that's what we got there. So you got a final, because maybe that final could give us what we've talked about here, the step by step of dealing with the emotional situations that you felt and we felt with those families that have these kind of problems. Then a step after dealing with those where we go. That would be really helpful. That's what I was meaning by step by step. Thank you.
Commissioner Blake.
Thank you, real quick. This map here, just so you know which one I'm referring to, is your water map right here, and you got it color coded and according to your index right there. But this area here is white, and you have it as unserved. Is there any predetermination of what utility would, if this area ever was to be served, who would get it? I mean, obviously it wouldn't be over here, but it looks like you have Cleveland Utilities or Savannah up here or where. So how do these people, what's their future look like as to what utility company they get to work with?
I suspect that area was left out because of the cost of service, the higher elevations, so nobody probably wanted it. It's the side, it's the side of White Oak Ridge.
So that,
So,
so they'll never get it, right? They'll never get water. Fine.
right, I mean, it would be expensive, because you'd have to create a higher pressure zone with tank pumps.
I was just wondering, you know, because I've been sitting in these meetings, the utility companies kind of draw their little territory, and then they become very protective of that territory, so whoever.
Nobody wanted that one.
So let the utilities fight for it or whatever. But on that same thought pattern, you mentioned earlier the decentralized systems that are available with the technology today. So you build a subdivision, you put this in place on the same line of questioning, what utility company is going to, because the water districts are different from, I guess, other sewer districts, right? So how would they determine what utility company, once you put in that, because you said that the developer puts the money, the capital up for that, and then eventually hands over the system to be maintained to a utility company. How, well, that has to be predetermined, right?
Yes, that'd be worked out at that time. When you do a treatment plant, you'd have to decide, when you plan for it, who's going to take it over and operate it. Certainly in the...
determine what utility gets to maintain that?
The one with a right of first refusal is the service area in which it's located. Most of these are located in Cleveland service area, majority of them. And so Cleveland would have the right to take over and operate that system. So far they haven't, but that doesn't mean that they wouldn't in the future. Right now there is a treatment plant, a decentralized plant in the Cleveland service area that's operated by Ocoee Utility District. And so Ocoee Utility District has shown a willingness to operate outside its service area, but Cleveland would have to give that up to them.
All right, so there's no chance that a developer puts in this system and then we gotta find a utility company because that's all gonna be predetermined. All right, thank you.
He can't put it in until you answer that question.
Thank you.
Commissioner Davis.
Thank you. One last thing for me. In the final draft, can you give us maybe some specific areas where in the McDonald and the Spring West area that you would want to put the water treatment plant? I think that's gonna be a big deal to the residents there. And if we have just a couple of areas that you could possibly look at, that would be helpful.
We can do that at this point of the planning because it's conceptual. We've tried to avoid tying down a specific property because there's just a lot of other things to think about in that, and it just and what happens is you get the cart before the horse. You get all kinds of public coming back saying, you know, you'll kill the project before we even have a chance to try to locate something.
Well, maybe just list a couple of options that are available out there.
Yeah, you know, I'm hesitant to do so at this level of planning, because you'd have to look at a lot of other factors on that. It's why treatment is so difficult to cite, as you understand. So.
Any other questions? Going once, going twice. Thank you very much. We've enjoyed it. It's the longest 40 minutes I've ever seen.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. We're available if y'all have any questions. Just please give us a call.
And if you have any follow-up to this, obviously our next step is prepare the final document, and we would be soliciting comments, questions from you all to help finalize that document, make it more useful to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Agenda item number C, non-contiguous annexation policy. Commissioner Peak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, you guys passed a resolution, I think in haste. You passed a law, a rule, or whatever you want to call it, in one meeting, but you wanted to impose, or you did vote to impose 2 work sessions to impose 2 work sessions to hinder annexation requests. I'm all for putting a sign up for the neighbors, being transparent if you're wanting to have your property annexed into the city. I'm all for that. But the 2 work sessions is a little redundant and unnecessary. What I'm going to be proposing at next week's voting session is to follow the same guidelines that we already have in place and follow the zoning requirements whenever we rezone a property. I think the rezoning is more important than an annexation, because of rezoning, you could put a commercial building right next to your family's house. So in my thought process, it should follow the same stuff. Why reinvent the wheel? We don't need 2 work sessions to hear the public come up here and have public meetings just because somebody's annexing the property next door to them. I think it was meant to confuse neighbors and make them think that they're going to be annexed next. And just to reiterate, and the paper can't say it enough, but they do say it every time I say it. You cannot be annexed unless you request it. There is no forced annexation in the state of Tennessee. So if you're wanting more eyes on this, I'm all for that. We should just follow the same protocol, send it to a work session, then at the voting session, you have the public hearing to hear any public comment. Anything more than that is totally redundant, and nothing's a waste of time when we're here. That's what we're here for, especially work sessions. But 2 work sessions is redundant. So next week, I'll be proposing to change that. If it works for rezoning, I don't see why it wouldn't work otherwise. So that's, if you'll put that on the agenda for next week, a resolution, I guess we have to have a resolution to amend that one or to change it to 1 work session. Then at the voting session, we have the follow-up public hearing, same as the rezoning request.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
could I be recognized?
go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just like to add to that, I mean, the transparency thing. And I question the intent of that myself too. And because the transparency of it, I mean, they advertise it in the Cleveland Daily Banner on any properties being considered, you know, plan of service. There's plenty of opportunities to come, I mean, as far as holding up a private property owner to selling their property. I agree with Commissioner Peake's assessments, you know, 2 work sessions, and we couldn't even take 2 work sessions to even come up with this, and to, like my suggestion was to look into see what other counties do throughout the state. But we want to make the property owners wait 2 consecutive work sessions, and I don't know.
Thank you very much, sir. Any other comments? Commissioner Alford?
I don't see that it's inhibiting the property owner at all from selling his property. All I'm doing is transparency for 2 work sessions. And if, I went out the other day and looked, we've done 6 of these things, and the only one that's been developed in the last 3 years was on Old Chattanooga Pike. It's about finished. The one we did on Inslee Road, nothing's doing there. Nothing's going on at the Pleasant Grove. Nothing's going on in Benton Pike. The only thing that's done anything on Holloway Drive was a service station's been put in. So I don't see that there's a big rush, because obviously these people that are buying these properties and want them annexed aren't doing anything immediately with them. They've been sitting there for quite a while. So I don't say that 2 work sessions, and if you go back to the, nothing against the banner, but they only have like maybe 20,000 residents that actually read the banner. So I think it's a good way of contacting the people in the neighborhoods, and you know, let them know that something's going to happen. So basically, that's my reasoning for it. I have nothing against it doesn't have anything to do with that. It's just to let the neighbors know that there is a possibility that their property is going to, not their property, but their people's property that's going to be annexed close to them. And I thought the gentleman made a good comment earlier, don't develop far out areas. In other words, where there's no main roads, should develop them. Now, if you look at our last two, Pleasant Grove Road and Hensley Road, there's no main.
Prior to even touching or breaking ground on that could go up to almost 8 months to a year before that developer can even start the process of everything that he has to go through. And basically, too, I think that the sentiment that's been expressed in this commission with the non-continuous annexations, and then this resolution that just got passed, you're gonna see developers put in their contracts, we will purchase your property prior to it being approved by Bradley County, the annexation, and we're gonna ask you to put the signs up, and we're gonna make sure all your neighbors are happy, and then we're gonna make sure that the commissioners will, and I'm all for transparency and putting the signs up. But I hope when they come in and, you know, we listen and their concerns are backed up with evidence that, you know, are substantial. Like say someone comes in and says, oh, the roads are not adequate. I don't know of a development that has happened here recently that it hasn't worked. And because some of the projects that I've been on, that is some of the concerns, but as far as I've ever seen, the roads do work. And then some of the roads get improved when those developments happen. And it's usually the city that's improving those roads that are leading to those developments. 22nd Street is a good example of one. But, you know, it's just going to put, there's going to be a burden on the property owners. They're going to have to try to get by two hurdles. One, this commission approving the annexation, and then the other is the resolution that just passed. And that will all be passed on to the property owners. So, you know, and I'm for people wanting to sell their property and the heirs to sell their properties and get the best value for their land, and developers purchasing those properties if that's who the property owners decide they want to sell that to, and the American dream continues for our citizens in Bradley County.
Thank you very much. We've beaten this horse completely dead, almost.
It's not dead yet.
Commissioner Peak, and then Commissioner Hughes. That leaves only Commissioner Mason and myself that have not spoken.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, this is a work session, and if we had spent more time on previous work sessions, this may not have been hastily ran through. So, y'all signed up for this when you got elected, so hear me out. So, when you pass a law, resolution, or whatever you want to call the rule that you proposed and passed last week, I never heard any reasons to pass the law, rule, or resolution. Nothing substantial, just to give the neighbors time to see it. So we don't think a rezoning request is just as important. We don't have that stipulation on them. So I wasn't going to get into this, but we'll just discuss it since it's already been alluded to. The intent was ill-willed. It's always ill-willed towards the city of Cleveland because we have a few that don't want to get along with the city of Cleveland. They want to impede anything the city of Cleveland does or any landowner wants to do or any developer wants to do because some of us are just anti-development. I can discuss in a work session, and I have the floor, Mr. Alford, and I relinquished my time for you earlier. Mr. Alford, I have not even spoken your name, so there is no point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Let's hear the point of order, and we'll decide if there's not a point of order.
We're beginning to get accusing the commission being personal stuff. I thoroughly disagree with her comments, and I think we probably need to eliminate any mention of any commissions or commissioners that is in her written statement here, I guess.
I have not alluded to any specific commissioner nor mentioned your name. May I continue?
The chairman rules on that, please.
I would only ask that we not make reference. I think it's commonly known to everyone on the commission who is being referred to. So I would ask that you please continue, but leave it out if you could.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will not infer his name. So,
Point of order, she just did.
Commissioner Peak, if we can't comply, we'll pass it on to the
Well,
next speaker.
if we can't comply, we're gonna call in a legal on the point of order. If we're gonna do that, we'll get Crystal up here.
Sir, okay.
So continuing on, see, he blocked my whole point of thought. However, there are some anti-city sentiments up here that continue to try to block developers.
Referring to the commissioners again.
Oh, get
Point
over
of
it.
order.
Grow up. Developers. It's always about developers and builders, and the anti-city sentiment, not up here.
You're the only one that
Just-
complied. That point of order is
Okay.
being considered. You're overruled again. Can you please avoid that part of it and continue on with what you've got to say?
That is ridiculous, and you know it, and I'll get Crystal to come back to this point of order for next week. Because nobody knows Robert Rule of Order up here.
Point of order.
Well, you go call Crystal and bring her down here, because I've still got about a 30-minute speech. So, if we continue down this road of requesting rules, laws, and resolutions that make no sense, and we only have one work session for them, and we don't evaluate what the real issues are and why they're being imposed, then we run a risk of creating an anarchy up here of people that just hate the city or nobody wants to work with the city, and we just want to show everybody out there that we have more power than anybody and that we're going to impose these rules for no good reason. I still have yet to hear a reason, just to let the neighbors know. And then, oh, well, Cleveland Daily Banner only has a few people that read it. I know that nobody follows the news. They don't follow anything we do most of the time. They don't know that you can't be forcefully annexed. They have no idea. So until we tell them that, you have 2 work sessions open for this request when we don't even do it for the rezoning. So it makes no sense. If it's good enough for rezoning to only have a sign up for Bentley, is that 7 days that we put it up? We tell the public 7 days in advance, the sign's next door to their yard. If they've got questions, they usually call the planning department and ask what it's up for. Then they come to a work session. Then they come to a voting session where we have a public hearing. That makes perfect sense. Let's just continue that way. Otherwise, we're opening up the door to have mass chaos and confusion when they come through thinking, oh, are you annexing us? We're next, we're next. And that's all it's created for. It's not transparency. I'm all for the sign, but one work session is all I'm for. I'm just saying, why are we reinventing the wheel? I haven't seen a reason to reinvent the wheel. If we're going to reinvent the wheel for this, are we going to go back to rezoning and our BZA requests and all the other variance requests that we get? Are we going to have 2 work sessions on those from now on and have public hearings at every work session? It's just ludicrous to me that we're trying to reinvent the wheel. Let's just follow the plan that we already have. Work session, voting session, public hearing, vote session. That's all I'm proposing.
Thank
That's
you.
all I have.
Commissioner Hughes.
All right, I'll make it quick. The only reason I was going to talk anyway was to bring up, yes, I support the sign all the way. Every annexation we've had in my district that was like this, I get calls about it after the fact, after it's went through the commission. I think that there should be transparency. There should be a sign. There should be some type of notification to these people other than the paper, other than just word of mouth. So I completely agree. Now, I was not going to bring this up, but I'm going to bring it up. We talk about property owners' rights. We've talked about everything under the sun. We need to worry about other property owners that adjoin that property. But besides that, as a property owner, a developer buys a property, they're a property owner. Now, to say there's not forced annexation is just construing the facts. If you tell someone that you can't have sewer unless you have, or you're annexed into the city, that's forced annexation. I don't care how you look at it. Developers are there to make money. They know if they can't put a sewer in, they can't make money off that property. It's forced annexation. You're forcing the developer to do it. So, hence, I'm done.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I seconded that motion. And then one of the reasons why I seconded that motion had to do with the fact that this is an interlocal agreement. This is an agreement between the city and the county for probably the largest project that would be done in that. And I made that, and I'm a city representative on the county. Just to say I have negative vibes against the city because I seconded this motion. I seconded this motion because of transparency, and this is an interlocal agreement, period. So I think that's just what I want to say. The question was, why logically would you do this? That's why I did this. That's all.
Thank you very much. Communication from the audience. Do we have anyone in the audience that would like to speak? Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Bentley, Mr. Bentley.
Come on up, sir. This has been educational for you, man.
Well, we're just going to change courses. I was just going to say, I commend the commission for bringing this group in and doing something that was forethought, and planning for the future of our county. I think it's extremely important. I also, as a property owner or manager of property, I think it's extremely important if we're looking at water or sewer lines. It's, I have so many easements through our properties. I think using roadways is certainly a protection of a person's, somebody's property rights. When you can run it through other people's property because, for instance, gravity sewer running down streams, I think that you're going through somebody who may not want you to go through them, but if you're on the road right away or close to it, that's just a great place to run utilities. So I think that's a wonderful idea. If we can continue looking at forced pumping on the sewer when you go to, starting to think about the sewer concept. I had two questions. One of them is, if you have a piece of property and you have one of these sewer lines running down your road in front of your piece of property, and you have a failed sewer system, a septic system, do you have to tie in, when you ask for a permit to reconstruct your fill lines, for instance, do you have to tie into that sewer line simply because it's there?
I don't believe so. I think you can repair your system and not have to tie in.
Because I've had a couple of properties that are very close, Mary Davis, you were talking about years ago, and that was unfortunate. One day it'll probably get used, okay, and everybody will be happy, but we do have some sewer lines on the north end of the farm, and I have some properties that I purchased when we also purchased the apartments that were removed. And if I have a failure on some of those lines, I have a problem sometimes getting a permit to get somebody to come out and do any work on my fill lines, simply because I'm so close to that sewer line. And so, anyway, I just want to make sure we don't create a problem for those who don't wish to use the sewer lines. I certainly wouldn't want to be annexed just because I wanted to take advantage of a sewer line. So that was a concern. No comments, okay.
Ed, I need your name and address. I'm supposed to have.
Okay, all right, I'll give you that. And then the last question was, on the systems that produce the water, and it's going through a UV system, and it's purified, and I know you would prefer to put it on property, back into the soil, not straight down into a stream of some type. Is the quality good enough to go into Candy's Creek or any of our other streams? Because Candy's Creek it gets pretty ugly downstream, but it's not always so. It's a lot of sediment, you know, a lot of farming, like ours, cattle farming, pretty rough on the, you know, sediment. But the quality of the water, not including the sediment, is pretty good.
It is. You can treat it to drinking water levels.
Okay.
That's not what's being proposed, but especially after the UV disinfection, it is very appropriate for a clean stream, yes.
Okay. Well, that was all my questions, Chairman. I just wanted to thank you again. This is forward thinking, and, you know, I know Bend About is protected, so to speak, but nothing's forever, right? So we all have to plan for the future. You never know. So anyway, thank you.
Got one more coming up. Yes, sir. Need your name and address.
I was supposed to pick up my grandchildren, and they're gonna be terribly mad. Let me tell you, I think y'all really need to think this thing through. Transparency, I am for that, because I don't like to see a place get hurt. You know, if you've got a little house, and, you know, a man gets one house in a lifetime usually, he doesn't want somebody to cram a big subdivision in right next door to where he can't even hardly get out of his own driveway. That's not happened to me, but I see it happening. And I see what's gonna happen out in my area. Y'all keep talking about 22nd Street, you talk about Hensley Road, and then there's some other property I've heard is supposed to be developed out there. There's a lot going on, so try to keep the people. Some of them may want to move down into Georgia or something, you know, sell their house and leave, which is okay. But I like for people to have a chance. I'm not in the building or investing property, investing in it, but I am interested in what you guys do and how you all look at everything. I want you to look before you vote. And I want you to think before you vote. And there's no use in, you know, I'm not fussing at you, but I'm just saying, hey, look, let's work together. You know, I think you pulled them together or apart. I bet that's me, my grandchildren.
I need your name and address, please. I'm probably the only one up here that doesn't know who you are, but.
Now, wait a minute. Somebody's talking to me through these things. Hang up. No. Hang up. I don't know how to make them work. But look here, thank you so much. And I agree with these guys 100%. Fundamentally, go to those areas that need it the most and take care of it and work your way up. Okay? You and y'all do that. I'd like to see that.
Sir, if they're through talking to you, I still need your.
I just now hung up.
I still need your name and address, please.
I just got them. I didn't, you know, I saw the bill today and I took them out, but I put them right back in because I couldn't hear. Thank you.
Matt, you want to use your office address as your?
Yes, sir. And, well, I thought I had Jerry's address in here too, but, Jerry Bancroft. Yes. And Matt Bentley, and, my address is 636 Old Alabama Road, McDonald.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And let's see, we've got, the veteran ceremony coming up Thursday at 11 o'clock. Then we have the road committee meeting coming up at 10:30 Monday morning. We're adjourned.
Thank you.